Justin Frye, Ohio State's offensive line coach on their 2024 national championship team, has departed for the same position with the NFL Cardinals in the National Football League. And today, what I want to discuss are several candidates to replace Justin Frye as Ohio State's offensive line coach, a position that no doubt is going to be coveted. Ohio State is one of the best, if not the best, programs in all of college football. I think that Ryan Day is someone who you want to work for. I think that being Ohio State's offensive line coach is easier in certain ways than being the offensive line coach at other schools, thanks to the skill position talent, the wide receiver room in particular, and all the talent you have to work with. It's also more challenging in some ways because the expectations are much higher. You all know, if you've regularly watched my channel, that I have been very critical of Justin Frye, and I will say right out of the gate, I think the criticism was deserved. I also think that the man deserves his flowers for the fact that he was able to put together several different offensive lines. They always seemed to play with effort. They never quit, and they did help the team win the national championship. They were a part of a legendary 14-2 season that was full of roller coaster moments, ups and downs and curves, but at the end of the day, they won their first national championship since 2014, the Ohio State Buckeyes did. And I think that there are many different candidates, many different people, great people, that Ohio State can choose to fill this void, and potentially I think they can upgrade this position, which would be absolutely fantastic for Ohio State, as I know Ryan Day said so himself. They want to win more national championships. They want to continue this run, build momentum, make a dynasty. But before I get into this, I ask you, if you have not already, to like the video, to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, comment your thoughts down below. You all know college football. You all watch it. So tell me which candidates you think Ohio State should have on their list, who they should go after, who would be a great fit. And also, check the links in the description and also the pinned comment for my Patreon page, for the Discord server, which is free to join, and also for the merchandise store. On the Patreon page and the merchandise store, there are ways to support the channel monetarily by either representing us, like wearing a sweet college football with Sam sweater, or on the Patreon page you can donate monthly, but you can also donate via Super Chat in the comment section below. But anyway, I really want to get into this because I think that Ohio State is a football team that is great in so many ways. I've been a Ryan Day defender from the get-go, and I think that has paid off rather well. Like, if there was a way to calculate my defense of Ryan Day as an investment in him, I'm not going to lie, I think I, along with most others, sold a lot of it, or at least a significant portion of it, after that Michigan game. But I did not come close to selling all of it. I still held on to a lot of it. I still said that it didn't make sense to fire him after that game, at least from a logistical standpoint. Like, they weren't going to get anyone better. And I think the playoff run showed that. There is no one better for Ohio State that they could realistically get than Ryan Day. And that's fantastic. That means that, the athletic department has done its job, and that means that Ryan Day is right for the job. One of their only weaknesses this past season was their offensive line. And I think that was in large part due to injuries. It was also due to the fact that Justin Frye did not bring in bodies, so the depth was rather thin. And I really want to kick this off by saying that he becomes the second coach to leave after the Buckeyes won their championship. And at the end of the day, that just happens. Nick Saban in Alabama always had staff turnover. Think of the school up the road, what Ohio State fans call the team up north, what everyone else, including myself, calls Michigan. Ohio State's biggest rival, and Ohio State is Michigan's biggest rival. The only other Big Ten team to win the national championship in the college football playoff era. Michigan has had staff turnover under Harbaugh. In fact, it was kind of a meme that every few years Harbaugh would lose large parts of his staff because, high-pressure program, didn't necessarily like to work for him. Not everyone's cut out to consistently coach for several years at a blue blood program. And that's not just the case with Alabama or Michigan. It's the case with Ohio State too, obviously. And also, if you have success as an assistant with a team like Ohio State, you are going to get head coaching options. You are going to get other teams and organizations like the Arizona Cardinals who say, hey, you weren't fired. You helped win a national championship. You were on that staff. Your players talk glowingly about you. And look, you helped develop Josh Simmons. You helped resurrect Seth McLaughlin's career. We want to try your services for however long they said was in the contract. And then if it doesn't work out, they'll terminate him. If it does work out, maybe they'll give him another raise, extend him, or even further promote him there. Justin Frye has been criticized by me and several others for his poor recruiting, and I still think that, contrary to what some people say, I don't think the development has been elite. I don't frankly do. I mean, take, for example, Donovan Jackson. Donovan Jackson was a 5-star out of high school, freak talent, was a Greg Studwara recruit, and yes, Frye mostly developed him, but outside of him, who played amazingly on the offensive line? No one. And the offensive line, to be fair as well, they didn't face many stacked boxes. They didn't face a whole lot of pressure in the same way that other offensive lines did, because Jeremiah Smith, Emeka Egbuka, and Will Howard's wonderful arm talent, accuracy, and awareness exist. It's harder to put pressure on an offensive line like Ohio State's with the skill position talent they have helping them out than it is, let's say, Michigan's offensive line, where, you don't have any receivers, you don't have a quarterback anyone cares about, so people are going to stack the box and just, try and get stops, try and force turnovers. So it's different, but what I will say is that he deserves some credit, and he deserves some props for having to deal with the offensive line injuries and not letting it become a total disaster, which it looked like it was going to become against Nebraska. Against Texas, the line was put into a blender, but then again, Texas as an elite defensive line, it's the same thing with Michigan. I think that Ohio State has a great chance to upgrade the O-line coach position, and I think that would be wise for multiple reasons. Number one, imagine if Ohio State's offensive line last year stayed healthy. They'd probably rush for a few hundred more yards. The offense would be remembered as one of Ryan Day's best. And you know what? If not for the O-line injuries, or maybe just better O-line depth, so if the injuries happen, the line still plays at a very good caliber, they probably beat Michigan. They probably beat Oregon too, because a huge part of the reason why Ohio State had some inconsistency in that Oregon game is when Simmons went down, they couldn't run the football. And even though Will Howard was, able to pass the football with wonderful proficiency still against the Ducks, it would have helped to have more of a ground game to lean on in that second half. And also, not just for reasons that in hindsight are kind of cosmetic, because Ohio State won the national championship anyway, and that team will forever be remembered. They'll forever be legends. I think that it just helps long term. For a year like in 2025, when Ohio State loses 8 starters on defense, when they lose their best players on offense minus Jeremiah Smith, it helps. Max Clare is coming in as the tight end, and he'll be, I think, one of the best, if not the best tight ends in the country in 2025. It would be such a help to him to where maybe he's not the best blocker. Now, of course, that's an exaggeration because he's a tight end. Offensive linemen are typically better than tight ends at blocking, but you get the point. It would be helpful whether you have a great tight end or not, whether you have elite running backs, but especially if you have running backs that are just good or average, to have a wonderful deep offensive line in front of them to narrow the margin of error, where it's not you get a long run or you give up a TFL, like it felt like Ohio State's rushing offense was in the months of late October and November. You either get a good run, or you get stopped at the line of scrimmage, or you get tackled for a loss. It helps with consistency. It helps keep defenses on their toes. And if Will Howard had a better offensive line this year, I don't think they play anyone competitively outside of maybe Oregon the first time around, and maybe Michigan plays them competitively. I mean, even if they use the same game plan with an elite offensive line, I don't care how brain dead the game plan is against Michigan, they still beat Michigan. I mean, they run the football better. They therefore pass the football better because Michigan is on their toes. It just, having an elite offensive line, take it from a guy who, Michigan fan here, is a fan of a school that over the past several years has consistently had elite offensive lines. It makes the job easier. An elite offensive line, near elite at least, until they played Georgia, helped Cade McNamara look way better than he actually was at Michigan. In 2022, Michigan's offensive line allowed J.J. McCarthy to kind of ease into things, and Michigan's rushing offense was kind of unstoppable that year, outside of a few quarters, a few minutes of football. In 2023, Michigan's offense was really old. It had 6, whether it was, fall camp or draftable players on the offensive line that did very, very well. It's so beneficial. And speaking of eliteness, I want to start off with Tier 1. These are guys who probably won't go to Ohio State, who I doubt Ohio State's going to make like a serious offer towards just because they're content at their current schools or their current schools can match Ohio State in terms of resources. But I still think they should be called so that you can make them say no. Kyle Flood for Texas, Phil Trautwein for Penn State, Joe Rudolph for Notre Dame. Those are the 3 Tier 1 guys where if Ohio State earns their services and they hire them, I am terrified. If I am any team that has to play Ohio State in the regular season, I'm terrified if I don't have to play them because I'm thinking, you know what? I know they lose a lot on offense, but they return Jeremiah Smith. They have Julian Sayin, who has a higher ceiling than Will Howard. Let's be real about it. They upgrade at tight end. And even though they lose a lot on the offensive line, they got plenty of snaps last year because of the injuries, and they massively upgraded at O-line coach. And in the future, they're going to be much better at recruiting the offensive line. And that means Ohio State's offense could be better in 2025. Like, these are candidates for the job that if one of them are hired, they unlock the possibility of Ohio State's offense being better. I'm going to say that again, better in 2025 than it was in 2024. Without the same inconsistencies, without, the same over-reliance sometimes on Will Howard to make things happen or on the running backs to negate some of the issues up front when matched up against elite defenses, elite defensive lines. It just lessens the burden. It eases the burden. I don't care how much Ohio State loses on the offensive line. These coaches, 1 year, I think, can make things better. That's, again, Kyle Flood, Phil Trautwein, Joe Rudolph. Kyle Flood at Texas has recruited 5 five-star offensive linemen. Kelvin Banks Jr. is going to be a first-round offensive tackle. Jake Majors is viewed as the second best overall center for the upcoming NFL draft, only behind Ohio State's own Seth McLaughlin, who I will remind you resurrected his career at Ohio State, but I say resurrected because he was pretty darn good under Nick Saban in Alabama outside of 2023. And I think, honestly, that may have been a Jalen Milroe problem. I was questioning that at first, but after the season Seth McLaughlin had and after the season Jalen Milroe had, especially Jalen Milroe's offensive line, there might be something to that. For Phil Trautwein, he's an elite recruiter like Kyle Flood. He has brought Penn State's offensive line up to being one of college football's best, which is amazing because guess what? The knock on James Franklin has always been the trenches, both offensively and defensively. They're improving in both those areas thanks to Deion Barnes on the D-line, but Phil Trautwein on the offensive line. Olu Fashanu was the first ever first-team All-Big Ten offensive tackle from Penn State. He got drafted in the first round. I know that Nick Dawkins coming back as a future NFL player in the 2026 NFL draft. Old, yeah, but he'll probably get drafted at some point. And he's recruited 5 stars like Jevin Williams. Alex Birchmeier was a former 5-star. I'm blanking on some names like Cooper Cousins, 5-star. Penn State has out-recruited everyone in the Big Ten, including Ohio State on the offensive line from a high school perspective. Joe Rudolph for Notre Dame is the last name. Think of Joe Alt, who just got drafted. Think of Joe Alt. Joe Rudolph developed him. Joe Rudolph did. Rudolph also has Big Ten experience from his time at Wisconsin, where they were just a run game offensive line factory under Paul Chryst, also a pass protection factory. He's an elite recruiter and an elite developer. And Notre Dame's offensive line, it suffered the same caliber of injuries that Ohio State's did. And you know what? They had depth. Ohio State didn't have depth on the offensive line. You may shoot statistics at me in the comments section, and I don't care because Notre Dame didn't have Jeremiah Smith. You could never stack the box against Ohio State because you were a moron if you did. It's an easy first down to whatever wide receiver is wide open. Notre Dame doesn't have that. Notre Dame's offensive line had to carry the team to the playoff, carry the team through the regular season, through Riley Leonard's struggles, through an inconsistent wide receiver room, through Mitchell Evans being injured for half of the year and not being super effective after that. And yeah, they did well. They have depth. They had several freshmen and younger players who stepped up. That's why Pat Coogan and Rocco Spindler transferred to Indiana and Nebraska. Pretty good destinations, I would say, because the O-line's that deep. So that's tier 1 for me. Make them say no. For tier 2, these are candidates where I think Ohio State would just be an upgrade. It's not that they would be as world-breaking as tier 1 or, but let's just go with or, they'd probably be more open to joining Ryan Day because their schools don't have the same resources or maybe they're not as renowned. Jim Harding at Utah, Jim Michalczik at Michigan State, Bob Bostad at Indiana, Brian Callahan at Minnesota, and we have 2 more candidates from this tier as well. We'll get to them, though. Harding's been at Utah forever, and he's put together several great offensive lines from the Pac-12 and the Big 12. Michalczik was at Oregon State under Jonathan Smith. They produced a first-round offensive tackle in the 2024 NFL Draft, and they just were so good at running the football, protecting their quarterback. I mean, they made DJ Uiagalelei look good. Huge part of that was the pass protection he had with the offensive line in front of him. Bob Bostad from Indiana. Indiana's offensive line this year was pretty good before Drew Evans went down. Now, again, somewhat of a depth concern there. I think bringing in Pat Coogan for them and returning Evans, returning one of their tackles. I forget which tackle it was. Might be Carter Smith, might be the other guy. They'll probably be better depth-wise. But then again, Bob Bostad would have a much better recruiting profile and just he'd have the name brand and the recent history to back up recruiting there, which he doesn't have at Indiana. He has one good year there. Was also on Tom Allen's staff in 2023 where their offensive line consistently graded out fairly highly per Pro Football Focus. He's done a great job at developing. Brian Callahan from Minnesota, he's a guy who I think's done a phenomenal job at developing. Think of Ariante Irsay. Think of John Michael Schmitz. Also think of incoming Ohio State transfer Philip Daniels, who was good as a young player. Now, who developed him? Who scouted him? Who recruited him? Who coached him? Yeah, Brian Callahan. And Minnesota is a school where run. And when they pass, block. I think he would be a great hire. And I think the development that he has showcased with some, elite college football offensive linemen, with the fact that he is a player going to Ohio State that Ohio State was interested in because he played well, I think that speaks volumes right there. The other 2 candidates in this tier are Brandon Jones of Missouri. And I think that, Brandon Jones developed Armand Membo into a projected first-round pick, and Missouri's offensive line has consistently graded out fairly highly. They were good last year. I think they were good above average this year, not quite as good. I know that the offense for Missouri was rather inconsistent, even with their easy schedule. Still think he'd be a great candidate, though. And then there's Matt Moore, who was West Virginia's offensive line coach under Neil Brown. The offensive line was consistently one of their strengths, even with Brown's incompetent coaching. Think of Wyatt Millum. Think of Thomas Rimmick. Think of other players. I know that last year, I think, was it Brandon Yates? Maybe I'm misremembering his name or combining 2 different names in one. Was drafted highly from West Virginia. He's developed several NFL-level players with the Mountaineers. He went to Virginia Tech, which I thought was an underrated hire by them, and he also has plenty of coaching experience. So maybe, psych Virginia Tech, you thought you were getting a good offensive line coach. You're not, because Ohio State's just going to poach him right out of your backyard. Tier 3, and then we'll get out of here. These are just candidates I want to touch on. These are filler moves. These are guys who wouldn't be upgrades over Frye, in my opinion. Or maybe they could, but it's not a guarantee. You have Tim Drevno, who's on Ohio State's current staff as an analyst. LaCharles Bentley, former Ohio State player, runs his own consulting business. Eric Wolford from Kentucky. And if you want to make headlines by stealing Alabama's O-line coach but not get very good results, you can probably hit, Chris Kaplovich up. Drevno would probably be an upgrade on the recruiting front. compared to Frye, I don't know if he'd be a better developer, because Frye, very bad recruiter. I think that some of the stuff that he contributed outside of that in terms of recruiting, more so like scheme, for example, was questionable. I think the development overall was probably above average, good, but not where it needed to be, especially for a blue blood caliber school like Ohio State. He had previous coaching experience at Michigan, USC, UCLA. He's recruited and coached for several high caliber institutions. So could be an internal promotion. Would it be the best? I don't think so. Is it viable? Yeah, of course. He probably will do a better job than Frye recruiting. LaCharles Bentley, I think his hiring would have a very wide range of outcomes. Could be very good. Was a good offensive lineman with Ohio State. Runs his own consulting business. But his own offensive line academy, where, he's coaching guys one-on-one, from my understanding, that's different from coaching an entire unit. So I'd be very interested to see how that would work. But I'm not an Ohio State fan. If I were an Ohio State fan, I'd be very cautious here, because if it's a disaster, well, that's not good. If it's a resounding success, then, that's also good. But you do want to be cautious here, and there are several better options, in my opinion. Eric Wolford from Kentucky, good recruiter, developer, was the Alabama offensive line coach from 2022 and 2023, where they, recruited very well there. Chris Kaplovich from Alabama, he's recruited well, but then again, that may just be the Bama logo. He's recruited previously at Michigan State, where he was the offensive line coach under Mel Tucker, offensive line coach at North Carolina under Larry Fedora. Pretty good recruiter overall from my research, and he could probably be plucked away, because I don't think Alabama would be too sad to see him gone overall, but I would stay away based off of how those Michigan State offensive lines looked under his tenure, and also his experience at North Carolina, which didn't yield, really good results either. And Alabama's offensive line this year was pretty hit and miss in a lot of ways. So that's it right there. Those are my candidates for the Ohio State offensive line coaching job. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also hit that notification bell so that way you can get notified when new content from College Football with Sam drops. I appreciate you very much, and also share the video around to others who enjoy the sport of college football and love it as I do and as you do, and comment your thoughts down below so that we can have a conversation, because I want to know what you are thinking. And join our Discord server where we talk college football 24/7 via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Thank you to my Heisman Patreon members, Crash2488, Brasco Rascal, and Conlo OH. Thank you to my All-American Patreon members, Chris Lane, Ismar, and Tyler Nye. And thank you to my All-Conference members, John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, Joshua Jorgensen, and Will Loftus. Make sure to check out my merchandise store and or Patreon page, or super chat down in the comment section below to support the channel. The Patreon page and merchandise store links are in the description or down below in the pinned comment. I hope you have a wonderful day. It is December, so Merry Christmas and also Happy New Year. I will see you guys soon.